Hi everybody, it's Imogen and welcome back to Colouring Kid. So this is a bit of a different video. I'm going to be doing a full-length colour along, and this was requested by Easter Ellen. Thank you so much for the suggestion, Easter. I have been wanting to do one of these for quite a while now, but they take quite a lot of time, and I figured now is a good time because I'm almost breaking up for school and I will have more time to colour. So she also requested that instead of it being silent, I kind of talk through my process throughout it, which I thought was a really valid point, because sometimes it is good to have, what I'm doing kind of explained. So I will try and do that throughout. So just a few things about the video as this is going on. I have put bits of paper with the colour names and codes next to my colouring so you can see what I'm using. I am just using Prismacolor pencils, that's all I'm using, because I figured they're one of the most popular pencils and lots of people have them. And also with all of my colouring at the end, in terms of gel pens and stuff, I will be using extra things. So if you don't have fine liners or glitter gel pens or anything, that's fine. You can just leave those steps out and just use pencil instead if you wanted to. But yeah, so far for this, I am doing the snails to begin with. And one thing to note about the actual colouring, I'm not going to be showing every single thing that I do. So I'm not showing all 3 snails as an example, I'm only showing one, because they're all very, very similar and it would waste time doing every single thing. So for the frog, which will be shown later, I'm only showing how I do the head, because the colour palette and the way I'm colouring is very similar for the rest of the body as well. So I thought that would be an easier way to be able to do the full length colour along, and since I'm explaining what I'm doing anyway, it should make sense. So for the snail, so far I am just doing light layers, and as you can see now with the kelp green, with all of those little dots and circles that Clara Markova has pinpointed on the body, I am doing small areas of colour there to define them. I forgot to say at the start of the video actually that this is from Fairy Celebrations by Clara Markova. So I did use a reference picture for the snails and the frog, just to try and make them as accurate as possible. I've coloured snails in the past, but I just wanted to make sure that I was getting them right. So I'm using some cream here, and I also use the yellowish tints like the jasmine colour, and also rather than just using all greens, I've got an artichoke colour which has hints of brown in, so adds quite a lot of depth. And also I thought it would be fun to just add a bit of a red cheek, just because it's a whimsical book and it's something that I wanted to add to the snail. You'll also notice when I am colouring, especially with the Prismacolors, I will keep going over with the same colours over and over again so that it layers up. I do go over with the colourless blender, as you can see here, on some bits, and I do it very, very lightly. This is really light pressure, so I'm not moving the pigment about too much. It's just to do that finalised layer. So yeah, as I said, when I'm layering, I will keep going back to the same colours and layering over and over again so that there's less white space. And this paper's quite smooth anyway, but it's really good to make sure that before you use the colourless blender, you're layering as much as possible so that it's not so that it's not having to push around the pigment too much. And again, I'm just going in with some extra shadowing with the kelp green. So I'd really like to know if this way is useful for the colour alongs, you know, in terms of seeing what the colours are and my explanation. I would really like some feedback, because this is the first time that I have done this in a very long time. When I first started my channel, I did do colour alongs and they were real time, whereas this is obviously all pre-coloured and then I'm doing the voiceover afterwards. So now I'm moving on to the shell here. So I've really enjoyed colouring the shell actually. Lots of these colours are quite unusual colours that I wouldn't usually use, but this page I think is a really good opportunity to be able to use those colours. And the reason I picked this page is because it has lots of little elements that I thought would be fun to show how I colour them. So it does still have quite a bit of background space, and I will be doing a background for it. That will probably be one of the next things I do. And again, with that, I'll only show a small area so that you get the idea of how to do it, but I won't show all of it. So again, with the shell, I'm doing lighter layers. Whilst you're following along with that, obviously the reason I chose this page is because of all the different elements. So I will show you know, how I colour lanterns. I'll probably do my see-through mushrooms. I love these little bottles with the trees in. I think they're really sweet and will be fun to experiment with. So there's a lot of scope with this page and I'm really excited to colour along with you. I'm not sure how many parts it will be, and I'm not sure how long it will take for all of them to be uploaded. But I'm breaking up from school this Friday, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to get it up. We'll get more colouring done for the page over the next week or so. So now moving on to the burnt ochre from Prismacolor, obviously, because that's the only set I'm using. I'm using a technique similar to how I colour my fur, so it's in little strokes, and the reason I did this was because there are quite a lot of defined lines usually on the shells of snails, and I wanted to kind of give this effect. So if you haven't watched my fur tutorial, that also might be beneficial to watch, because obviously even though it's not fur, the technique is very similar. And I just want to mention that if you can hear any noise in the background, that's just my family. Just want to give that disclaimer. I also have very faint music going on in the background, so when I'm not talking for short periods of time, or you know, it's just something to fill the silence whilst you're following along. And if you do follow along, I so appreciate it, and if you do just bits of the picture or the whole picture, please feel free to email me, because it means so much to know that you enjoy my videos and maybe can learn something. So my email is down in the description, but it's ibutler1308@gmail.com. So at this point with the shell, I'm beginning to add shadow and really kind of building up the layers. Sorry. So again, I do go over with the colourless blender at the end, although it's not smoothing it out. I'm still using the kind of swiping type motion with my pencil. If you don't have a colourless blender, you don't need to use it. I just like to use it at the end. The other interesting thing about the shell was the different colours within it. So I didn't want it to just be all one type of brown colour. I wanted to have the sandbar brown, which is more of a, it's kind of more of a umber colour, but it's got a bit of kind of a bronzy greyish colour to it as well. But then obviously you've got the red, like Tuscan red, and mineral orange, which is obviously quite bright. And again, I'm going over, I'm going over the same areas with the same sorts of colours. So you can see here I'm finishing off, I think, with seashell pink. So in a way, this video is kind of like a colour and chat, but also, you know, it's me chatting about my process. So it's not really, and obviously it's not in real time as well. That was the other thing that I wanted to say. This is at 1.25 speed, so it's slightly faster than my actual colouring. And that's just so that, you know, it's a tiny bit faster, not so much that you'd really notice a difference, but also it does make the video slightly shorter, and that way I can fit more into one video. And also, you know, it's not like it's at double the speed, so it is still a good speed that you can follow along, and you can always slow it down on YouTube if you want to. You can mute it if you don't want to hear the music or my voice. That's absolutely fine as well. I know some people like to have it absolutely quiet. Sometimes if I'm following a tutorial, I might have that tutorial on mute and then be, you know, listening to something else. So as you can see, those two snails are done now. I did the other one in advance, and I'll do the other one at some other point, but now I'm moving on to the frog. So I was conscious that obviously with the frog being a greenish colour, it would tie in nicely with the snails, but I didn't want it to be exactly the same. So you'll notice with this that I use very similar colours to the snail. However, I am layering with that spring green, which is a bright green compared to the more olive tints like the lime peel and the kelp green. So there is a difference in how they turn out, which I think is important, because I wouldn't have wanted them to be exactly the same. But you know, with not having coloured frogs that much, it was the harder thing to do out of the snails and the frogs. So yeah, again, I'm using that apple green, which is, it's not that bright, but it's still got the undertone of a bright green. So I'm hoping for this video that I will be able to do quite a lot of different elements in one. So again, I'm not sure how many parts it will be. And I will, obviously, I think it's unrealistic when you see a tutorial and it looks as if the whole picture is done in one go, because with a picture like this, obviously I'm not going to be able to do it in one sitting. So I will take breaks and just put the clips together. So as I'm speaking now, I only have the frog and the snails done. So in a couple of days or tomorrow, you know, I will film more and then add it onto this. So it will be in larger chunks of video rather than smaller parts like this, because I think this is only about 15-20 minutes, whereas I know some people with tutorial have it in smaller amounts of videos, so you know, only 2 parts, 3 parts at most. So I will try and get it into that if I can, and that just means that the videos will be longer, so they might be about 45 minutes to an hour. I also figured out how to zoom so that it wasn't blurry. I managed to figure that out on my camera, so I hope that it's better for you, because in the past when I've done tutorials you haven't been able to see it very well, and I didn't think it was anything to do with the quality of my camera, because it's a really good video camera. So yeah, I just figured that out, and that just means that when I'm zooming in you can see more of the details. So again, with the frog, with all of the dots that are highlighted on the frog where Flower Mark Over has pinpointed those areas, I'm doing them in the beigey brown colour, which contrasts from the green. So I went in to shadow them with the dark colour, I can't remember what it was chestnut, and then I just went over them lightly with the ginger root. And as you can see here, I'm layering again with the spring green and going back to it all the time. just to build up the vivid colour underneath the other layers. So there are some details on this page that I will do with fine liners, but there are other ways that you can do it. You could just do pencil if you wanted to, but for some small parts, like maybe the flowers, I'll do a base of fine liner and then go over pencil. So it's pretty much the same as if you were to do a base of pencil and then go over with more pencil. So I hope that makes sense, but I will talk more about those things when I get to them. And obviously, you know, with me, I like to use my glitter gel pens, my white gel pens, stuff like that. So, you know, I will still use them because I still want the page to turn out how I want it to turn out. But yeah, I will just let you know as and when I do. So yeah. Because, you know, even though it is a tutorial for you guys, I do want to still have fun doing the page, and I do enjoy putting the glitter on and metallic gel pens and things like that. So I hope this sort of format is working for you. I think that it is, I've tried to make it as similar as I can to other tutorials that I watch, like Chris Chang. However, there is the element of me talking, which I hope is beneficial, and I think I did want to include it because I think for me, having a process explained to me is much easier, especially if you're a beginner and you're watching how someone colours. It's sometimes easier to kind of hear how they colour. So again, with the frog, I'm doing very light layers and going over very lightly now with the colourless blender. And you can layer again after you've used the colourless blender. So even though it is meant to kind of push the pigment into the paper, if you do a light layer like I did, you can go over with more pencils afterwards and still build layers, which is really, really good. It's not like that's the final layer and then that's it, so you can keep going. As you can see, I think I was wanting this to be a little bit brighter, and just bear in mind that everything that you see on camera may not be actually exactly what it looks like for me, because obviously from me seeing it to what the camera shows is very slightly different. I think the colours aren't quite as bright, although it's pretty good, but again, you know, lighting and stuff like that will have something to do with it. I've tried to make it as good as possible for you. So that's the frog pretty much done. And we'll be going on to other elements. So yeah, that's pretty much all for the frog and the snails, so there will be more elements. Okay, so now moving on to the leaf. Again, I'm only showing how I do one of them. So for the leaf, I wanted it to be a more muted green, obviously contrasting from the earthy olive green of the snails. So this colour palette is exactly the same for the leaves and the grass as well. So I wanted to keep that cohesive so that there wasn't too many different colours going on. So this colour palette is actually a new one to me. I blended a few of the colours together and came up with this. So I'm really happy with that actually, and it will be one that I write down to remember front of the picture. So you can see here that I'm going in with light layers, and I only burnish at the end of the leaf. So for the rest of this, I am just doing light layers, and I've had lots of questions about how I burnish, and I am planning on doing a video probably in Botanical Wonderland, because I've had a couple of people ask. I think I mentioned that before. About how I burnish, and really it's just about pressing down really hard to get the desired effect. So I build up layers, and then when I'm happy with it, I will go over with a light colour or a colourless blend or something like that to then burnish it. And if you're not sure what burnishing is, it's basically pushing down the tooth of the paper, so you'll end up with basically no white space. So as you can see here, I'm going in with the Celadon green, which is quite an unusual colour. It's sort of got a bluey grey tint to it, which I really like, and it's colour that I need to start using more, and I'm really happy in a way that I am just using Prismacolors, because it's allowed me to experiment more with the colours that I have in front of me, and not just dipping into lots of different sets. So I would like to try on pages to just use one type of pencil. I think that's quite a nice challenge. And also with colours that I always love to use, say in the Holbein, it forces me to try and create them, but using the colours that I have to hand. So in terms of the placement of my colour, I'm going in where I think all the shadows would be. So all of the places that Clara has put dots, the pointillism technique, and also where I believe there to be shadow, that's where I'm placing all the colour to begin with. So she's done it a lot more in her recent books especially. She puts lines and dots to show where shadow is. So here with the grey-green light, this is the colour that I will end up burnishing with, but for now I'm just doing a layer on top of those two layers that I've already done, just to push them together, because they are quite different colours, so it's important that they do come together before I then go over with the final layer. So the unusual colour here that I didn't think would work was the kelp green, because it is the darkest green that I used for the snail, and I wanted to use it again. But it's a very different colour, because it does have that olive brown type tint to it. So I only did this very lightly, and then I went back over with the lighter colours to then mask it in with the others, so it didn't stand out too much. I really like the effect that it gave. So again, I'm only going in the shadowed areas with this. I'm not going everywhere, I'm just doing some areas. So again, with the leaf, I will only be showing one. So I've already coloured one, as you can see in the top left corner, and that's the outcome. But I will only be showing one of everything, or a bit of something. So I'll only be showing a bit of the background, a bit of the grass, that sort of thing. Because once you've got the technique and the colours, it's pretty much all you need. So as you can see here, I'm going back in with the Celadon green over that kelp green, because they are very different colours. So it's important that you go over them. And it does look a bit grey at the moment, partly due to obviously the camera, but also I haven't gone over with the pale sage yet, and that's quite a bright, lighter colour. So it will change the overall effect. Okay, so going back with the pale sage now, and this is really where I start to fill in those areas that haven't been coloured yet. So I don't do everything, I still leave some highlighted areas ready for the burnishing, but here I am starting to put a bit more pressure on with my pencil. And you can see that as I'm going through the pencils, the time that it's taking to use them becomes quicker and quicker because I've already built up all of the initial layers. So the grey-green light is the last layer, and you can see here that I'm really pushing down. This is being burnished now. So lots of the dark areas might not need to be burnished as much because you've already got all of the layers before it, but for the lighter areas where there hasn't been much of the pencil, that's all the grey-green light, so it's a very light colour. I absolutely love it. And here I'm just going over a couple of areas with the kelp green again, just to finalise the definition of the dark areas, and then smoothing it in again with the celadon green, because it is quite a bright colour and it would stand out a bit if I didn't. Then go over it again. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the leaf, and now I'm just repositioning the camera a bit to do the grassy area. So I'm just doing a bit of it, and it's the area around the sweets. So with this, it's the exact same format in terms of the order of the pencils. So pale sage first, as before, building up the layers. And what I was conscious of here is trying not to worry too much about making it absolutely defined, because in the end it is just grass, it's just a background. So I've kind of put shadow on the backs of the grass with the kelp green, but most of it's not too defined and I don't think that matters too much. So again, this is exactly the same colour as the leaf. So as you can see here with the celadon green, I'm just placing it down. I'm not worrying too much about if I'm going over lines and stuff. It's just about getting those initial layers down before I then start to add shadow. And especially in the grassy areas, Clara puts lots of dots to show where shadow would be. Equally, it could be where highlights would be. It's entirely up to you. This is just what I decided to do. Sorry, so if you can hear any noise in the background, that's just my family. So yeah, here I'm going in and putting shadows in for the grass now. So again, I'm putting the kelp green down, but then going over again with the celadon green, and that's just to make sure that it's not too bright. So here I'm not actually doing that shadowed colour on the jagged areas of the grass. I'm doing it behind it to give the impression of shadow. And as you can see here, once I got the hang of the colours and the order, this was a much quicker process. which is always good because the backgrounds can take a while. Sorry, the camera just blurred out a tiny bit then. So this is the final layer of pale sage before I then go and burnish in with the grey-green light as before. And I didn't really feel with these that I needed to use a blender pencil, so I didn't, because I burnished it. But, you know, I left it. So, yeah, again here with the grey-green light, and then it's pretty much done. The other reason I wanted to keep the colour the same is just because I don't really want the grass standing out. It is in the background. I want the things that are within the grass to stand out a bit more. So that's why I decided not to introduce a new green colour. I wanted to keep it the same. And with the leaves and things, I might not necessarily do green. I'm not too sure yet. Obviously, leaves don't have to be green. So we will see. I might do a few of them because there are quite a lot of variations of the leaves. But the pointed ones, circular ones, and then the bigger curved leaves. So now moving on to the background. Now I actually had to try it a few times to get what I actually wanted, and the bit that you can see on the left is what it will look like. So initially it was too dark and too bright, so I muted this a bit using the blues and just lighter layers. So with this, it is very, very light layers. I can't stress it enough. It's just touching the paper. So the sky blue light colour, which I'm using now, is bright compared to the cloud blue, which is what I go to burnish with. So this has got a brighter quality to it, whereas the cloud blue to me has a slight tint of purple, and also it has quite a lot of grey. So here with the Mediterranean blue, it's a very, very light layer, because initially with the one that I did on the left, it was too bright because I put too many layers down of the dark colours. And to me, obviously it's a background, so even though I'm colouring it in, I don't want it to be the focal point of the picture. And it's still got that kind of muted quality to it, kind of still reminds me of a rainy day, that sort of thing. I've just finished a picture in Tenderful Enchantments, which I showed in my vlog, and that's a very, very muted colour. That's a very misty type blue with some greens in it, whereas this is still blue. On the camera it's showing up a bit brighter than what it actually is. But I use muted turquoise after this, and that just helps give a more greeny, slight grey effect. So with the shadows, I'm kind of just going in where I think there would be a bit of shadow. I don't colour absolutely everything in one solid colour. I still define the shadows, because for me that's just what I want to do. So that was a very light layer of muted turquoise, and then I go back in very slightly with the periwinkle. So all of these colours up to this point are so light, and then the final layer, the cloud blue, will be burnishing it. I do leave some of the white areas unburnished because then I go in with the colourless blender, and you'll see that in a minute. So I'm picking even fewer areas to put the periwinkle, so I'm not even putting it in as many areas as the other colours, because this is really the darkest colour, the shadow colour. And then the cloud blue. So you can see that overall this background hasn't taken much work. It's one of my quicker backgrounds, I think, that I have done across my books, and I do like to do backgrounds in my Clara Markova books. So I generally do one for every page that I do because I really enjoy doing them. But also I think it just finishes the picture off. If I don't think there needs to be a background, I won't do one, but so far for all of these I have done one. So what I'm planning to do with these bottles that are within the background is making them glossy using my Jelly Roll glaze, which you've seen me do before, but it will be a lighter blue for the outer edge of the bottles, and then I'm going to do a kind of pink or purple or something like that, kind of mist around the tree or something. I'm not too sure. I've kind of named this page Dreamland because the fairy is sleeping and it's very whimsical, so it will have some element of kind of whimsical colours. I had a bit of trouble at the top there trying to burnish it right up to the edge of the paper, but yeah, that layer is done now, and now I'm just burnishing with the colourless blender on those lighter areas, and that's all it needs, and then it's done. So obviously up until now that's all I've done in the video, but I imagine there will probably be a few more bits after this because it's not too long of a video yet. But yeah, that's the background complete now. Okay, so this is going to be the last section of the part 1 of the video, and right off the bat here with the tree I ended up rubbing it out, so what you're seeing now is a layer of the raspberry again, so just imagine that the bit underneath it isn't there, and then I'm burnishing it with the Deco Peach, so that's just pressing hard to blend the two colours together. So yeah, that was a mistake on my part, but I hope it still makes sense. These were so fun to do, I really enjoyed doing them, and they turned out exactly how I planned. They are kind of, to me, kind of tiny little bottles, and I think they're so cute, and I wanted to make them really whimsical. So what I'm trying to do here is reuse a lot of the colours that have already been used on the page, but obviously there are some new colours. So I've used the same blues from the background and the same browns as the shell of the snail, and then yeah, the only bit that's added now are these new purples and pinks, which will be featured more in other parts of the picture, like the lanterns and the sweets probably. So that's the plan in terms of the colour scheme. But for the backgroundy areas of these bottles, I was just placing some colour just randomly, and the main colours for this is the lilac and then the processed red, and then I blend them with the lighter pinks. So you can see here with the processed red, I'm basically just filling in some of the areas, and it's really nice because even though the lilac and the processed red are quite different colours, they do merge together really well. You might have noticed on the other bottles as well, I've left the little string of beads not coloured in, and that's because I'm probably going to go over them with a gold gel pen or a silver gel pen, something like that. So there will be small details that I will leave, and I will do all of that sort of embellishment stuff at the end. So now I'm blending with the lighter colours. So what I'm doing is with the Deco Pink, I'm blending the lilac, and with the Deco Peach I'm blending the processed red. that's just how I decided to do it. And just to let you know, when I'm using the lighter pinks, I'm pressing harder, but I was layering lightly with the other colours. Okay, and then we come to this grassy area at the bottom, and I didn't want to introduce any new colours. I didn't want to do green, so I decided to just do the purple and the blue as before, and it blended in really nicely. So I did the lilac for the shadows, and now I'm burnishing with the cloud blue, and because it's such a light colour, there's still a contrast between them. And the cloud blue actually has a slight purpley tint to it anyway, slightly grey as well compared to the sky blue light, so it was a good pencil to blend with. And then for this top bit, I'm using the exact same colours that I used for the tree. So if you didn't really understand what I was saying before about the tree, hopefully it will make more sense here. So again, I'm just putting the raspberry colour there where the shadows are, and then burnishing with the Deco Peach. So that's really, really simple. That's, you know, just me putting down colour and burnishing it. There's not really any fancy thing you need for blending with that. So with the sky blue light here, it may be quite hard to see because it's quite a light colour, but I am just placing the colour where all of the lines are on the outside of the bottles. So I'm not going right to the edge, but I'm doing all of the lines, and then I go in very lightly, really, really lightly. It's as light as I did the background with the Mediterranean blue. And I'm just placing a tiny bit of colour on some areas for shadow, just a tiny bit. The overall effect that you want for the bottles is for them to be lighter than the background. That's just what I always do, and I find that obviously if you're looking through glass, well, to me, it won't appear as bright. And now I'm blending with the cloud blue and then going over with the white. So I go around all the edges just to lighten them a bit and add a bit of highlight, and then I just blend all the colours together as well. And I know that this overall thing is very unrealistic, but obviously it's a book with loads of fairies in and things like that, so I'm going to include it. I just really, really like the overall effect of these books. Okay, and then there's just a couple of other bits on the bottle, so I decided to do the Mediterranean blue again. Just keep it cohesive. And also I think it is much easier with a colour along to try and not do too many colours, because then there's just so many different things going on, and the smaller amount the better. So again, I'm using the artichoke and the cream that I also used on the snail bodies. So as I mentioned before to you, I'm not sure how many parts this video will be. Sorry, not video, the series of the colour along will be. I'm hoping no more than 3. We might be able to get it all done in a second part, but lots of the stuff that's left, there's a lot of repetition with them. So, you know, there's a few mushrooms, there's a few lanterns, so obviously I'll only be showing one of each type thing, but it may be that I need to do all the embellishments and stuff in a separate video, but we'll see. I imagine that video will be a lot longer. So with this now, I'm going over with a clear jelly roll glaze, and this is an amazing pen. I will show you after I finished it how it looks in the light, and it's a really glossy effect and really gives the effect of glass. So if you don't have this pen, don't worry too much. You know, you don't have to have it. If you don't have it, don't feel that you need to go and buy it if you are following along with the tutorial, but it's just a nice touch, and I use it on everything now with glass. So yeah, I just do a layer of that. I don't go over the tree though, I just do all of the other area. And there's also the code there if you want to find it. It's the Jelly Roll Clear Glaze. As you can see here in the light, that's what it looks like. It's a lot more glossy when it hasn't dried yet, and you can see those other two that I have done, it's fully dried there. And then in this next clip I just had to wait for the clear jelly roll to dry a bit. Make sure you do let it dry. And then yeah, I'm just going over with some white Posca. Okay, so that's pretty much everything for this video. I really hope you enjoyed watching it. As I said before, it is something a bit different. I think this first part was filmed over the course of 3 days because I did a bit each day, and I think that's the way I'm going to do it. So let me know if this was a good format and you enjoyed it. Looking at the picture now, I think it may be possible that it's in a second part, although that part may be very long. Or I will do 3 parts depending, but it should be no more than that. So I'd love to hear how you got on with it, if you enjoyed the video and if it worked for you. And again, as I mentioned, if you do end up following the tutorial, which I would very much appreciate, please send me pictures. I would absolutely love to see them. It means so much. So yeah, that's all from me, and I will see you in the next part or my next video. Bye everyone.